Well, Katie, I have to say it is honestly such a pleasure to be doing these recordings with you. I get so much out of it. It's a it's a true privilege to be sharing with our audience these conversations on what I really think is one of the most important topics of our time, which is to remind everybody that we have built in to ourselves, all of us, the innate capacity to be healthy and to heal, the innate capacities to cultivate and to catalyze our own intrinsic health and healing. And, this is really the, the framework that we're playing with, and we're trying to model here, um, is by doing that, by stepping into a deeper understanding of how that works, how we can turn on those innate capacities. We're terming health sovereignty. It's the reclamation of these intrinsic abilities that we're born with. And the mechanism of action or the pathway of doing that is called salutogenesis. And salutogenesis means health generation. And it is the other side of the coin. Currently, we're only operating from the pathogenesis side. Everything in our healthcare industry is really based on the deep investigation of disease, disorder, and dysfunction, and then trying to find ways of mitigating that, generally with drugs and surgery. And we're here to say there's the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is salutogenesis. And for that, we need some basic landmarks. We need some basic guidance. So we have been doing this podcast series to kind of unpack those a bit for our listeners. And the framework is the four quadrants. And the four quadrants, again, to remind everybody, the first is the body, the second is selfhood, the third is one another, relationships to one another, fourth is relationship to nature. And today we're going to be back in the upper right quadrant, the quadrant of the body, which has these five pillars of health: hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. And we're going to go deep on the third pillar of movement, of exercise, which I know you're an expert in, both the things that you do in the world as well as the way that you've lived your life on an individual, personal level. And I'm really excited to really go deep with you on what that means and how we really reconnect to the pillar of our body, particularly through movement and exercise.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation today, and I've already learned so much from the previous podcasts we've done in this series, but this is my sweet spot. I mean, even with the last name Armstrong, it's been a lineage that within my family to pursue fitness, to pursue movement, but it's a true love and a true joy, and I just want to make sure that people have a way in to movement if they're not already moving, but also have the knowledge to understand how they can best utilize their time moving if longevity is their focus, if optimal health is their focus, because there's so many fads out there. There's so many different ways to move our body, but I'm hoping in this conversation today we can help people focus their time and energy, because so much can pull on us to do other things. And I think when people are empowered with knowledge, then they're more apt to hold to the habits that keep them healthy. So I love that you are bringing awareness to this preventative side, this piece of not just waiting until we're sick to change things, but rather be proactive about optimizing the way we live our life. And the beautiful piece is when we feel good, we feel good. And then everything about our lives is better. So this isn't something to add to your to-do list as work. It's an acknowledgement that once you get started and start treating yourself well, it's a positive snowball effect of wanting to do it more and more and more. And so giving people the map or the blueprint to do that is so empowering. And I just can't wait to get started.
Yeah. So as always, we want to really kind of home in on the most powerful and most potent levers. So the kind of the 80-20 rules, the Pareto principles, where can I apply 20% effort to get 80% output or impact or ROI? And, I think today it's a timely day to be having these conversations because, well, yesterday, the Department of Health and Human Services put out a report on the status of our health. And you and I understand that health is just another word for well-being, human thriving, human flourishing, right? And this is the current state of affairs in our country. Basically, and this is mainly focused on the young people of our country. So, according to this report, roughly 75% of American youth aged 17 to 24 do not qualify to serve in the military. They may not want to serve in the military, and that's fine. But the point is, they're not able to do it because of obesity, asthma, allergies, autoimmune diseases, so on and so forth. We now have the most obese, depressed, disabled, and medicated population in the history of the world. That's a statement by Marty Makary, FDA commissioner. Over 40% of the roughly 73 million children aged 0 to 17 in the U.S. have at least one chronic health condition, and that's generally considered on the physical side. And then on the mental health side, teenage depression has more than doubled from 2009 to 2019, and more than 1 in 5 children over the age of 6 are now considered obese. I mean, and it goes on and on from there. So
those are devastating statistics.
it's so mind-blowing and chilling, and I think that we just have to start with humility. As participants in the healthcare system, we just have to acknowledge the total and utter unmitigated tragedy of those statistics and say, guys, we have failed, and we have failed to be the leaders in the healthcare system, and we have failed in other industries. It's not just the healthcare industry that's responsible for those statistics. The food and agriculture industry certainly has a big hand to play there, and there are many.
Even technology. I mean, there are so many things pulling on children's attention away from what I think is a pretty natural drive to move.
Yeah, exactly.
Eating well as a kid, I think, requires an adult to guide the ship. But movement is an innate gift of a child.
Yeah.
And so the fact that there is so much obesity, which, yes, is an abundance of fat, but we're starting to see more and more that it's a decline in muscle mass and strength, just speaks to the sedentary qualities of at least our culture.
Yeah.
And I blame technology, at least in part, for that.
Yeah.
And more for adults, the 9-to-5 culture, just this expectation of being entertained rather than moving as a form of pleasure. I think that there's a lot that can be changed because we've seen this over a relatively short period of time. I mean, I grew up thinking that Americans were some of the strongest, most athletic people in the world. We were striving to win at
gold medals in the Olympics. Yeah, exactly.
But there's a divergence happening between the percentage of people that are striving for athleticism and striving for health. And they're seen as the outliers in our society instead of it being one of those situations where everyone's aiming for health and the culture is embodying that health, and the high tide raises all ships is what I'd prefer to be seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my frame personally is that these two goals, and they are encompassed within the definition of health span and lifespan, which is, again, we go back to well-being, thriving, and flourishing. What does that mean? How do we tap into it? And one of the ways is to say we don't get sick a lot, so we reduce acute illness. We don't suffer from chronic diseases a lot, so we hedge or mitigate or offset those. And then the third and really, really important one for quality of life and well-being and health is to offset chronic pain. And so if you take the trajectory of how many people who grew up, now our elderly population, they grew up in the 40s and 50s, they didn't have this kind of an upbringing where, the statistics were as dire. And yet such a large percentage of those end up with chronic pain in their elder years. We obviously are starting with a huge handicap already with this current generation, these last few generations. And so, it would be one of the goals of this conversation to sort of unpack what it means from a form and function perspective, form, function, fitness perspective, to move the body in a healthy way, but also with the goal of that whole idea of the octogenarian Olympics that Peter Attia is talking about, which I think is a beautiful frame. When I'm 80, can I still put the carry-on luggage into the compartment above me, and can I get down on the floor and play with my grandkids and these types of things without suffering intense chronic pain?
I gave a lecture last summer specifically on muscle and encouraging the yoga community to start lifting weights because my concern is that even healthy individuals, if they're not actively trying to build strength or think through their function as an 80, 90-year-old, the likelihood is they're going to be too frail to carry groceries in. And one of the statistics that I listed was that over 40, you start to see a decline in muscle mass unless you are actively pushing against it. That within 40 years, you could see a 50% decline in your strength. And so one of the things that I do at the beginning of these lectures is invite people to close their eyes, feel into their current strength. And what if they lost half? Half. Because that's not wild. That's a common statistic for individuals who aren't lifting weights. Could you still stand up from the toilet? Could you carry groceries in? Could you walk upstairs?
Yeah.
That's well beneath even being able to carry your grandchild or chase after them or be able to still travel, which may be your goal as a retiree. And so people's jaw drop.
Yeah.
And, even as I say that, I get goosebumps because it's such a concern.
Yeah.
And so I remind people, if you're not actively building the ability to lift a certain amount, pull a certain amount, hold your weight in these different shapes, that has real implications for function in your 80s and 90s. I want to be hiking a mountain, running, dancing, and playing in my 80s and 90s. But even if your goal is to just be okay, like you said, not dealing with chronic pain or not having to rely on somebody to do basic functions, this is something people need to take very seriously. And it's a harder motivator for a lot of people. They don't want to look that far ahead, but I think it's empowering to do it.
Yeah. So let's start with young adults, teenagers or young adults or middle-aged people or older adults. We'll set aside the pediatric population for now. And, in my frame, we talk about those 5 pillars of health. This is the third of the 5, exercise or movement. And each of the pillars has 5 components. So in this case, the pillars or the components of movement are, we need some kind of cardio. We need some kind of strength training or resistance training. We need some kind of deep stretching practice. And we need stability. And those are all kind of separate individual. Obviously, there are many movement practices that encompass all of those or some of those. And then the 5th one is a really important one for those outliers, which is rest. We need recovery. We need rejuvenation. We need rest after exercise. And, when we unpack those 5 pillars, it's basically, I need to move the body to increase my cardiovascular output so that I develop that level of fitness. I need to also identify my Achilles heel and fix it. What is my Achilles heel? What is my weak link? What is the little niggle that constantly shows up in my body that, people always tell me, well, I have a bad hip, or I have a bad back, or I have a bad knee or something. And my point is always, let's see what we could do about that.
I'm always telling my clients, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe we sort of go through all of these, and cardio is the most obvious one. What are your thoughts about someone who's not already an accomplished triathlete like you, and they're recognizing, they're seeing themselves in some of these statistics, and they acknowledge, hey, I'm not getting enough of this movement. What would be a great place to start?
Walking.
Perfect.
We're bipeds,
Mm-hmm.
let's start by walking.
Mm-hmm.
Or if that is unattainable because perhaps you're dealing with knee pain or suffering from obesity, hop on a recumbent bike.
Mm-hmm.
Just start moving. And for individuals who feel like they can't get out of their house, maybe they're a mother of a young child, dance.
Mm-hmm.
Put on a song and dance.
Mm-hmm.
Just start moving. I mean, that's the beauty of cardio in some respects, is that you can move in a million different ways and get cardio. It just requires consistent movement.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be heavy or hard.
Yeah.
There are various degrees and difficulties of cardio that you can advance through, but just start moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love this whole idea of start somewhere, start simple. Walking is a great place, and work around those weak links. I was a lifelong runner. I started running competitively age 12. And by the time I was 40, my body was like, I don't dig this so much anymore. And I went further and further, more and more towards the lower impact movements, where I was able to get just as much cardiovascular output and fitness, mainly by biking in all of the different ways. It's amazing how many kinds of bikes there are now: mountain bike and gravel bike and road bike and everything in between. And so I think that for many people, at a certain age, running becomes really, really challenging. The point is, you don't have to do that. There's a lot of indoor opportunities. You can do stair-masters and elliptical trainers and rowing machines and all sorts of ways of offloading those areas that may be injured, may be too arthritic to fully recover from, and still really meet your needs for kind of that daily requirement. So what do you think those daily requirement needs are for the typical person who maybe doesn't have much of a background, but likes the idea of not being in chronic pain when they're 80? They're not necessarily interested in training for a marathon, but they like the idea of good functional capacity as they age. What would be kind of an MVP, a minimum viable practice, in terms of cardio in your mind?
It's interesting because I hear such different statistics coming out of scientists, and it really seems to depend on what age bracket you're in, and it depends on what other movement you have going on. Like at a more advanced level, I'm not needing to do as much dedicated cardio because I'm a pretty active individual and I'm strength training at a pretty high level for long periods of time and incorporating some circuit training.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a really different candidate, or have a really different answer than somebody that's been generally immobile. Mm-hmm. And you asked me a question earlier about where to start.
Mm-hmm.
First place I have people start is 10-minute walks after every meal,
Mm-hmm.
just to start incorporating movement. But then depending on how old they are and depending on how active they've been and depending on their injury level, like I'm trying to work them up to at least 90 minutes in a week.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like bare minimum to me.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't feel like striving for optimal health.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, do you have a number that you like to tell your clients if somebody really pushed you for that number? Because I tend to look more at the individual and start moving them in the direction of improvement. Because I find that to be a little more empowering for people, especially when we're looking at a culture that's so far from ideal.
Yeah.
More is my answer. More.
Totally.
Do more.
Totally.
But what number do you like to say?
It's interesting when you look at all of the studies and the data and the literature, and then you look at your own experience and your own experience with clients or patients, as well as tuning into one's own body. Where I think the number really matters is how many days a week. I mean, I get this all the time. People are like, is 2 days a week enough? It's like, You mean to move your body 2 days a week? It's like, ask your body, how many days a week should we move, body? What do you
David, how
think?
many days do you move your body in a week?
Yeah, I mean, you know, honestly, I think the whole rest day thing is great for people that are, that are training for Kona or a super high level thing where they have worked so hard, they put so many hours in those other 6 days that they need to actually take a rest day. But for most of us, the rest day, in my opinion, should still be active. It could be active recovery. It could be, we'll get into flexibility and stuff, but it could be a yoga class. It could be a dance class. It could be a little hike with your friends or family or whatever. But I think the key message that I would have on this whole idea of movement and specifically cardio, movement that's not specific to strength, flexibility, or stability, i.e., getting the heart rate up a little bit, it should be every day to some degree. And 3 days a week is just not going to cut the mustard.
I also move every day.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy the days I don't move.
Mm-hmm.
And my rest day includes usually bare minimum a 45-minute walk or chasing after my daughter, or it's the day that I'm going to a concert and anticipating dancing for 3 hours. So I think people should be moving every single day. And I think the question just ends up being like how it's broken up.
Yeah.
And again, even defining cardio, I think you have these different zones of movement, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where it just really depends on what somebody's goal is and where they're starting.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Moving something every single day, not thinking about it as are you only doing 2 days a week of movement or 3 days a week of movement
of exercise, yeah.
And then it is really so individuated. Like when I have a woman in her 40s who's dealing with hormone dysfunction, we are tending to focus more on strength training, which takes up several days of the week.
Yeah.
But that is still working the heart. That is still working the lungs.
Totally.
And so while that may not be traditional cardio training, it has a cardio component.
Yeah. And we can get into some of the subtleties of like the high intensity interval training versus longer, slower zone 2 stuff. But I think an essential thing to talk through is most of us, certainly I include myself in this, and many of the people that we care for at Cloud Medical are just busy as hell. Like we're freaking busy. Life is full. We got kids and jobs and we got to make dinner and mow the lawn and all the things. And so I think there's something to be said about what would the ideal week look like if we agree that we have to do something every day or at least 6 days a week. Can we get all of those different types of movement in say 20 minutes or 25 minutes per day? And would that be sufficient? And, I think the answer is yes. I think there's this huge myth. I call it the myth of the 45 or the 60-minute workout. And oftentimes when, there are days that I don't have an hour. I simply do not. And over my lunch break, I may have a shirt like this and a pair of jeans on, and I have a t-shirt underneath, and I'll take this off, I'll go to the gym, and I'll do a really, really high intensity 15-minute just upper extremity workout, just on my arms, my bis and tris, and that's all I get in. But the delta or the difference between that and nothing is almost infinite. Like it's so amazingly huge. And I think it's a myth to say, hey, if you don't have a 45-minute block in your day or a 60-minute block in your day, just get the workout in tomorrow. It's like, no, we can sneak these things in when we're super busy. And, 10 or 15-minute workout is way better than nothing.
Music to my ears.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a really busy week for me. So this morning I only had a chance to do like a short HIIT workout. But I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
I feel amazing. And this is rare for me to have 2 days in a row where I haven't prioritized a workout. But similarly, yesterday I had to decide between some really beautiful business opportunities and a workout. And I just wasn't going to have time to change.
Yeah.
So I went on a walk in
Yeah.
the clothes that I was wearing,
Yeah.
even though it was kind of ridiculous, dressed not for a walk so much in the blistering heat of Colorado, but worth it, always worth it. And for my clients, again, for me, I'm trying to meet them where they are. Some are super athletes looking to push it even further. Some are breaking and needing to shift from going towards disease towards health. And I write 15-minute workouts. I call them workout snacks. They're a great place to start. I write workouts that are airport workouts, that are things people can do in business suits while they're waiting for their airplane. I do hotel workouts because we need people to see that they can't just go on vacation from their health and that busy can't be an excuse.
Totally.
Because what are they living for if it's not to be present in their own body and their own life experience?
Yeah.
What are they racing towards? Retirement, where they're too broken and ill to enjoy it? I sure hope not. So the other piece to that is, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, when you honor your health on a daily basis, when you fit it in when you can, you're living at a higher energy level, higher vibration, so you actually can squeeze out a little more life.
Yeah.
So those people that are starting with the workout snacks, it's not too long before they start doing a 30-minute workout.
Totally.
And if they're doing 3 30-minute workouts in a week, it's pretty fast. They realize they feel better on those days and they start asking for 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those are really exciting moments for me because it's when they start realizing that the work that they're putting in is changing them fundamentally. And it's not just your body that feels better, you get sharper. And as you get sharper, you start realizing you might be able to switch your day around. You might be more able to say no to some of those addictions that steal your time and energy. You start putting up boundaries in your life that allow you to honor your health more. So there's it's again, this positive snowball effect. So.
Yeah. I mean, boy, I love everything that you said and the positive snowball. I mean, I think a really important thing for everybody to know is, well, it's the topic of morphine and heroin and opium, right? So we know what these drugs of addiction do. We know that they're euphoric agents. We know that they're anti-inflammatory agents. And we know that they're obviously very powerful painkillers, the opiate class. What a lot of people don't know is that there's a word or a term for a molecule called endorphin. And the roots of the word endorphin comes from endogenous morphine. And so we make our own heroin or opium or morphine, opiates, inside our body. How do we do that? How do we boost our endorphin levels? Obviously through exercise. And so every benefit, if you want to think about it that way, or any positive effect of the opiate category of drugs, we can naturally simulate or stoke within our own bodies through exercise. Less pain, less inflammation, and an unbelievable feeling of well-being, the runner's high.
And it turns out a lot less risk than doing drugs.
Yeah, it's a far more salutogenic methodology than to take those drugs. So, yeah.
You had asked, what the optimal week looks like. And,
Let's go back to that.
In a sense, you had qualified it as for busy people that maybe only have 30 minutes. I would venture to say that almost every demographic would benefit from 3 strength training sessions. Do you agree with that in a week?
I mean, I do. I think that, we're going to be probably splitting hairs here. But if people ask me, look, if I literally only have 30 minutes per day to devote to exercise, and we can talk about, well, where's the resistance and moving that up. But I honestly feel compassion for that because it's not uncommon for me to be in that mode myself. I would just say, look, just do it. Do 6 workouts per week, 30 minutes each, and do 2 cardio, 2 strength, and 2 stretches. If you want to mix that up a little bit and say maybe 2 cardios, 3 strength, and 1 deep stretching, I'm up for that. I'm a hell yes to that. But sometimes keeping things as simple as possible and ensuring that you have enough time. This is where I think it's so critical. We need enough time to strength train around the entire joint. So it's not enough to just work on the quads without doing the hams and the glutes. It's not enough to work on our nice biceps if we neglect the triceps. So whatever time you need to do kind of both sides of the body, upper and lower body, with good recruitment of muscle tension, and what that MVP is, that minimum viable practice protocol program. I mean, we can talk about the subtleties of that, but the gist of it is, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that your percentages line up with how I train most of my clients. I tend to do a little bit more of a hybrid model. I also tend to work with people over 40 the most, and so I think a warm-up is pretty critical. And so my warm-up tends to incorporate some mobility work, which is a little bit of a mix between that stretching and stability piece, and provides a good foundation to then be able to dive in a little deeper to select muscle groups. And the way I pair, I guess I want to say to the people listening, this might feel a little bit like confusing or a little bit specific if you don't know the body and you don't know the muscles. And that's where I just really encourage people to get some help.
Yeah.
There are plenty of incredible health coaches out there, personal trainers, that can support this process. You don't have to become an expert before you even start, and starting is always the most difficult piece. So you're more likely to receive benefits from starting the process and maybe not fully recruiting every single muscle in the body initially. But as you start incorporating these practices into your life, you can get more efficient at them, see better results, and avoid injury. And it's just something to keep in mind. So I guess I'm just suggesting these like 3 strength training sessions, knowing that in a way they're already incorporating some of that stretching, either in a mobility practice at the beginning as a warm-up or in a true stretch cool down. And that can save a little bit of time if you say don't want to hop into a yoga class or don't want to just sit and stretch. But again, that may be more the demographic I'm working with and what they're enjoying and needing, and just the way I personally train, because every trainer is a little different.
Fair. So some cardio, some strength training, and some of that can include a hybrid of stretching and stability. I think stretching is so foundational. Many of our injuries, many of the things that lead to the chronic pain, is a result of that. And I think we talked about before how as people age, generally, unless they really, really intentionally offset this, which is the whole point of this conversation, they tend to contract. They tend to round their shoulders, begin to start to hunch over, and before you know it, you need a cane. So there's 2 problems here. One is you're literally contracting your whole body in all the wrong ways. And 2, you're becoming more and more frail. And this senescence, or becoming more frail as we age while we're contracting, leads to some of the most common quality of life dents that you can that can befall us. And so one of the classic examples is we're actually cruising along pretty well. We have a decent quality of life. Maybe we're not in chronic pain, but we're walking out of a restaurant at age 70 and we slip on the ice. And we don't have the structural integrity that comes from the flexibility training and the stability training. And so we fall like a house of cards and shatter the pelvis or the hip. And what happens is those people end up in what's called rehab, which is just a glorified word for nursing home, 30 days, 60 days, and many of them actually never leave. They never go back home.
I think the statistic for women is that 30% die over a certain age. I can't recall if it's 60 or 70, and 50% never see a level of recovery to the level that they had prior to the injury.
That's right. This is my normal baseline before the accident. I plummet, but I never regain prior function. And oftentimes, to your point, that can either be, I literally, that becomes a fatal event for me that leads to my demise and my ultimate death. And in many cases, even if you don't die, you never get to go back home. And so this is like the thing that I'm so focused on with our patients is what can we do to prevent that from happening? What you need to do, what we all need to do, what you and I do every day, is work on ways to optimize the cardio and the strength and the stretching and the stability. And the stability is something you definitely can get from yoga. You can get that from doing the tree pose and, balancing on one leg. You can definitely get it from Bosu balls and wobble balls and stability practices like that in the gym. But probably my favorite is the mini tramp. I'm a super fan of the mini tramp. I think that stability, another word for that is proprioception. We're developing the capacity to know where we are in space even when our eyes are closed in a three-dimensional way. And then to add the suspended element of, okay, but now I'm bouncing up and down, I'm actually in the air, really, really prepares our body through neuroplasticity to have a certain ability to then be in that unexpected moment where you slip or you fall. It could be in the bathtub, it could be on ice, it could be tripping on a sidewalk, and you just have much better body awareness. The brain and the nervous system connectivity to all of our muscles is just much more online. And so any kind of stability training I'm a big fan of. What would you say are some of your favorite kinds?
Stability is probably one of my favorite ways to train, and I train it in a lot of different ways. So, I'm in the weight room a lot just because as a female over 40, I feel like I needed to put on a decent amount of muscle these last couple of years. And so I'm using kettlebells, swinging them or complex movements, holding a weight over my head and marching, doing farmer's carries, things like that are actually building the stability muscles. So not just using them and training the brain and their function, but actually building those muscles. And then I have a 5-year-old and we have a trampoline in the backyard. So I'm on the trampoline.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
you and I have a very shared philosophy on what somebody should be doing, but we break it apart a little bit differently. So jumping is just a key component to how I train my clients for bone density, for just joy, for lymph movement, for so many things. Jumping is phenomenal. And so that's jumping on a trampoline, but that's also doing box jumps, that's doing single leg jumps, that's doing agility training, that's doing even like athletic, almost football like training. And so there's a lot of that in the way I train an athlete. And part of that I think of as stability, but it has overlaps into other categories as well. I'm a 25-year yogi, 25 plus year yoga and yoga teacher, right? And so I think yoga is a wonderful way to open the body while being in a stability training, headspace. So like you think of something like triangle pose, and if you're falling over, it could be for a lot of different reasons. It could be from tightness in your hips, lack of strength in your foot, just lack of coordination. Your chest tightness could actually be causing you to fall out of triangle pose. And so there's this whole body integration component that can really support somebody being able to stand up and sit down on the floor, know how to roll out of a fall. And so there's that as a method as well that I think is critical, because it's one thing to jump on a trampoline, but if you can't really stand up properly because your feet are tight, it's missing a piece of this.
Totally.
So I don't do as much yoga as I once did, but I spent 2 decades doing it so that my body doesn't have anything that's like pulling me out of alignment constantly or pulling me away from like a plumb line. And so that's where I think yoga and Pilates have a real genius, is that they're kind of in this stretched space of also creating strength. But then I also really love weighting somebody, because there's something about being really grounded with a heavy kettlebell or a dumbbell while they're then having to stand up and sit down or step from one foot to the next or walk or jump. that forces them to see like where there's either a weak muscle or an integration issue when they have more strenuous like component, like a more strenuous situation. And the only other thing I wanted to add to this category is I there's a group in, I believe it's Sweden, that teaches falling. So they actually have workouts that are based around falling. And it's intended to kind of not so much create stability, but almost the opposite, create this capacity to respond to an uncertain situation, train the mind. So it's almost like an acknowledgement that we will over time lose some element of stability. What then? And that's where I think your jumping is really fun, right? Because it's training the brain to respond to quick stimuli.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to do that too. And so if an individual, like, I don't think every person can hop on a trampoline. I think trampolines are actually
It's pretty advanced.
Yeah. So then it's ankle jumps, or even getting in the water where you take off most of the weight and jump in that setting, and then working up to something more aggressive. So it's a long answer.
No, it's great. I mean, I think begin where you are, and whatever that progress, that evolution is, so that we're mapping towards, vectoring towards that better likelihood of thriving, flourishing, well-being, and lack of chronic pain, has to honor the beginner's mind, has to honor starting slow sometimes, right? But to your point, eventually we want to hopefully advance such that we can take advantage of the really complex movements. And those are advanced movements. But, I'm a huge fan of this whole new realm of kind of functional exercise. I think Ido Portal was probably the guy that popularized it the most originally. And we have some cool groups here in town in Boulder, like ApeCo, that are really doing, I think, some beautiful work with that. But allowing people to understand the benefits of the primary things, like just purely hanging, and then learning how to move through all of the different angles and biomechanical endpoints, and really pushing into those areas, not past them, but into them, so that we can unlock some of those tight points, identify the vulnerabilities and strength. So it's like, okay, there's a key weakness here, and do all of that from the perspective of maintaining balance and stability. Well,
we're animals.
Exactly.
That don't
so much
think
of that
ourselves
comes from
that way.
The way animals move, right?
If we train in a certain way to then be able to move freely. Figuring out what capacity you have for movement in that controlled practice setting, whether you need to go to really basic movements, weighted or unweighted, like a lat pull down or pull up, like those are different advanced movements, but in a sense they're the same thing. Versus over time you might be able to swing on monkey bars, right? Like there's more freedom as you get more integrated and stronger and heal injuries. But ultimately, like, we want you to feel empowered in your free movement space. And so that's where I think dance and humanity comes in. Running too, like these are full body movements. And I feel like I almost just need to also call out swimming, because swimming is in such an incredible low impact option for free movement that strengthens the body, works cardio, gives you a chance to maybe start at a more beginner level or work through an injury. But we're all individuals, just like there are so many different types of animals out there, and each one of us has a different group of things that we can bring together for our sweet spot of overall training and movement. And that's where it's not a one size fits all. You can be drawn to certain modalities of movement in any of these categories, but they may then encourage you to bring in something really different for one of the others. Like if you're swinging kettlebells as your strength training, then maybe you need a more like rigid form of cardio to bring in some control. Or if you are a dancer, you might need your strength training to be a little more controlled, just to have these ways of opening and closing, strengthening and loosening. Like there's just balance ultimately is what we're trying to create inside of ourselves, while also acknowledging that we don't all come in with the same map. You know, some people come in with one leg shorter than the other, or a weakened heart, and so you really do need to create a situation that honors the individuality. And a part of that individuality is just joy. What are you called to do? Because you need to love what you're doing. Because if somebody asks me, how do you feel about one form, like HIIT training? There's some evidence out there that may not be the perfect choice, again, for women in the demographic I work with. But something is almost always better than nothing. And if you love it, let's set up everything else to allow you to do that.
Totally. Well, I will share something that kind of, I'm now 53 and made the biggest difference for me personally in recent times, which is a morning routine. So my morning routine it's not what I would count as my workout, but it sort of sets me up for the day. And so I do take advantage of yoga. And, you know, yoga has this beautiful series called Surya Namaskar, the Sun Salutation series, the 12 postures to greet the sun. And I'm a big fan of greeting the sun in the morning. That has many other benefits, mainly circadian balancing and kickstarting your metabolism and regulating leptin right out of the gates and all sorts of things, as well as doing it barefoot on the grass. So I've incorporated that practice. I do it in the winter, in the fall, spring, summer, barefoot on the ground, and I do these. You know, I've gotten to where it's very quick. I can do it in about 3 minutes. I can flow through that series fairly quickly and unlock those areas that just tend to get tight. The, you know, proximal hamstrings tend to get tight for me, and sometimes the quads, lower back. Then I move into, I just do as many, you know, I usually do 40 push-ups, and then I do some very, very deliberate squats, just air squats that are very deep. So I go all the way to the ground, almost with my glutes, and I often alter my posture. I do sumo squats sometimes with a very wide stance and more narrow other times. And those simple things, all of which take all of 5 minutes, just long enough for my dog to go pee and do his thing, does wonders for my body. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. It unlocks things. It like puts the mind in the muscle of some of the key big movers of the body, the glutes, the quads, and it just gives me this whole body stretch. And so I think that you can think of it as a pre-workout, or you can think of it as like kickstarting my day or whatever, but I find that to be immensely beneficial. Do you have a morning routine like that?
I have a morning routine, and at different chapters of my life, my morning routine includes different things. So at this chapter of my life, I'm working out first thing. So my morning routine is more focused on meditation and centering my mind, but I still have a 15-minute warm-up for every single workout I do that sounds relatively similar to what you're describing. I warm up every single joint. I do every major movement pattern, whether you're doing that through the standing poses of yoga or whether you're doing that through kind of more of an exercise modality. It doesn't really matter. But for me, it's the consistency of it. It's the fact that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a phenomenal way to just start.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people struggle with starting a workout or starting their day or starting their health routine. And so if you have something that becomes so habitual that you don't even think about it, that is hugely valuable.
Yeah.
I also think everyone should move in some capacity first thing in the morning. So whether you need to do that as a little exercise modality, I mean, in my 30s, I had, it was mostly my PT. Like I was a pretty high level athlete. So at that stage, you are kind of always working on some injuries or having some things that aren't quite getting all the way to resolved because you're still pushing so hard. So I would have about a 15, 30 minute lay on the ground, stretch, strengthen, warm up that sounds very similar to some of what you're doing also that really worked for me. But with my clients, AM, PM routine are vital. So whether they're incorporating it as like physical therapy, the start to their workout, or just working on being present so that one day they can start working in the movement, I think that that's one of the most important things to stabilize if you're aiming for optimal health. Because otherwise you wake up 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're like, what just happened to my life? Where is it going? Well, it's you're not present for it. So get in your body, still the mind and be present for your day. And I would add to that, I have a PM routine, and my PM routine is less about exercise because I'm trying to wind down, but it incorporates my body. It's more on that stretching mobility side of things, besides all the brush teeth and other like more self-care components. I foam roll and I use a running roller every single night as a form of rest, as a form of recovery, which is, one of the topics we're going to end up discussing.
Yeah.
But I start my day with something that integrates and wakes up, and I finish my day with something that kind of smooths out and supports recovery. And I think if you can get people to have a morning and a PM routine, like it's such an incredible bookmark for their priorities and for their goal setting, that then you can start just like peppering in some of the other positive activities throughout the day, whether it's this 30-minute workout that we're describing as like every day, or if somebody's has the opportunity to do longer workouts, maybe less consistent than every day, still incorporating 10-minute walks a few times during the day. But it's these consistent habitual activities that create optimal health, because you don't have to consciously choose to do habits. They are a part of who you are. And just to speak back to that statistic you described at the beginning about how kids are no longer healthy, I watch my daughter, my 5-year-old's natural biorhythms, and she's like got every one of these things we're describing baked into her just natural DNA. She wants to move and go outside and have some movement in the morning. She can't really go 2 hours without something that I would call like a mini movement or a full-blown exercise. And she really likes a hard workout most days.
Amazing.
And so we need to not allow that to be lost in our youth, and hopefully just perpetuate it throughout life. But it's never too late to reintegrate these things. The beauty of the body is it always returns towards health and vitality, at least incrementally, right? And so yesterday was always better than today, but today's always better than tomorrow, to start begin and start where you are and start walking towards these things that we're describing.
Yeah. I mean, again, we've used this line over and over. The body asks so little of us. It really does. And, yet modern life is hard. And so many of us are behind a desk for 6, 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours. And we get up to pee, maybe, right? Or go grab a little bite to eat or something. What wisdom do you have for people that are caught in that trap?
Fortunately, it's become pretty acceptable to have like a treadmill or like a walking desk. Those are amazing.
Amazing.
For individuals who are on meetings so that they're not necessarily typing, though I've seen plenty of people who can walk and type. And with all the technology now to do like voice memos that
Dictations,
you can then move into skipping typing altogether, there's almost no excuse. Parking further away from your job, or choosing a spot that you're, quote, going to lunch that's further away just to incorporate additional steps. Those things can go a long way, because when I talk to clients, I talk to them about exercise, like their workouts, but then I talk to them about a lifestyle of movement, and I separate the two. So when I'm encouraging somebody to walk, like I'm less even incorporating that as their cardio workout, and more just inviting them to see that if they're sitting for every second that they're not working out, they're probably not going to see the results they fully want, and they're not going to feel like working out. Whereas if they could just incorporate a little bit more movement, like you mentioned, going to the bathroom, take the long way, walk 3 laps.
Take the stairs, not the elevator.
These little things, but I've heard some, again, statistic recently that less than 2% of people ever take the stairs. Take the stairs.
Yeah.
Even in the airport, like go the long way, like bake in just little bits of movement, and it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Ask if you can take a meeting on a walk. Get used to plugging in for certain events throughout your day. By plugging in, I mean, put on some headphones and take the call on a walk outside. People's efficiency can dramatically increase by taking these breaks as well.
Yeah.
As an attorney, I used to be a practicing attorney, and I would set an alarm every 50 minutes to go for a 5-minute walk. And I found that my productivity during those 50 minutes would sometimes be 30% greater than if I didn't take the break over the course of a full hour.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not the only one that sees this.
No.
These are
Endorphins,
common understanding.
brain productivity, all of the things. So, yeah, one of a friend of ours at Cloud is a guy that goes by the name of Mr. Money Mustache.
That's a great name.
Pete Adonai, and he has created this whole philosophy and this whole paradigm, really, of getting out of the rat race. So managing your money such that you can retire in your 40s or even earlier. And he has an entire methodology that's based on that as the key goal. So that, back to this whole idea of sovereignty, you're not constantly dependent on a paycheck until the end of your life. But he's really a philosopher, and he goes deep into this unpacking of what it means to have well-being and to thrive. And when he did a deep analysis of the lifestyle changes that you can make that give you the biggest ROI on well-being, he said at the very, very top of the list is biking to work. And the reason that's so is it just hits so many things with one stone, right? So A, you're getting a great workout in. B, you're not using gas money, even if you have an electric vehicle, you don't have to charge it as much.
Cheaper.
You aren't contributing to pollution in the environment, and he just
Sunshine.
lists out all of these things. Yeah, it's just like this, you get 10 things back from that one simple thing. And you still have to get to work. Why not do it?
I heard a rumor that you do this. Is this true?
Oh, this is one of my favorite things in life. It's one of my favorite things in life.
And we do live in a city that allows for that.
Exactly. It's a great blessing and a privilege.
And I've actually chased around towns that allow for walking and biking to be a main mode of transportation, and you see higher quality of life in places that have it. But it's definitely safer in certain places than others.
Sure.
And that's where I think just deciding what your priority is. I mean, you're by bringing up this individual that's part of your practice, you're speaking to something much bigger, right? How it's an invitation for people to really ask themselves, what kind of life do they want to live?
Yes.
I often say that your life is your greatest masterpiece. And I have health as a non-negotiable. I build the rest of my life around what my body, mind, and spirit need. And I see it as a need.
Yeah.
And I understand that there's a certain level of privilege in that. But I also have noticed that for the most part, if you're resolute in your pursuit of health, the world does bend around it. If you can handle occasional comments to the contrary, when I first joined the law firm that I worked for, they were willing to let me come in late and only work in the office 2 days a week as a first year, because they understood that health was my top priority and training was something that was a non-negotiable.
I love it.
But I asked, how many people bothered to ask for that?
Yeah. I cannot resonate more strongly with that. Even the 5 pillars of health. So we have, again, just to review, hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. The third pillar is the longest finger. It's your middle finger because it has the most leverage. And people are like, where do I start with all these 5 pillars? I'm like, always start with exercise.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, because exercise will make you more thirsty. You'll drink more water. Exercise will make it so if you go to the gym in the morning, you're not going to have donuts for breakfast. Guaranteed. You're going to say, I'm not going to waste all that time and energy and effort to get my workout in and to spoil it with a crappy meal. So it's going to actually induce a greater likelihood to eat healthfully. It's going to help you sleep better. And it's probably the main and most important, most potent de-stressor. So exercise is the first and the most powerful pillar of all. If you just start there, the other ones will sort of fall in place almost naturally.
Preaching to the choir here. And I'd say we're actually sort of outliers in saying that, because I hear very frequently like, oh, what you eat is far more important. Like I worked for a more weight loss coaching company for a while, and they were far more concerned with macros and losing weight than they were with building muscle, which is why I actually left working with them, because it can take having a longer view if you're someone who's actually trying to see like a change in body composition, to focus on working out first. But ultimately, you create more sustainable results. Ultimately, you create more connection to the body.
Yes.
And that intuition is what I think is largely lacking by the loss of fitness education in children. Because teaching a 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old how to care for their body requires it being conscious. It has to be something they learn. If you teach a kid how to care for their body, how to move it, how to feed it, how to nourish it, they start having an instinct that, just like you were sort of speaking to, if you work out, you're just drawn to the right foods. You're more aware of how you feel. My 5-year-old, and I've said this on this podcast before, she's going to a birthday party and knows there's going to be cake. She comes up to me, she's like, Mom, I would like some protein so that I can have that cake without it making me feel bad. And she knows like, oh, I want this food and that food so that I have energy to be able to master the monkey bars tomorrow. Wow. And that's her. I don't push her really hard, but I do give her the information early on. And I'm just amazed at how it sticks and how it even translates to like wisdom. And so it's just a call, this is my just call to action to focus on the children, because we need to avoid having to like re-educate and re-inspire later on. But if you are a parent, recognize that the way you treat yourself is the most direct way to then teach that child. So if it's easier for you to have motivation to make these changes or do these things for your kid, I'm inviting you to do it for yourself as a reflection of your care for them. And so, I mean, that's just a piece to my heart, is that, as somebody, again, in this kind of middle age where you often have like parents that are starting to age, and that really shows how did they care for themselves. I feel really lucky. Both my parents are athletes. My mom owned an all-women's fitness center. My dad played 2 sports in college. But even choices around gaps in that care can impact whether they're dealing with chronic illness or disease. But when you're in this middle age and possibly caring for elderly parents and simultaneously raising kids, this is where kind of your call to action to be really efficient and do that sort of 80-20 rule comes in, because you got pressure and stress coming at you from all levels. But this is not the moment to stop caring for yourself. It's actually the critical moment to care for yourself the most, but to do it in a wise way.
You're such a great mom. That's so inspiring. I'm glad we came back to the kid thing. One of the things that I found as a dad that ties a lot of this together is, my daughters are now 20 and 24, and as they got older and they started to have all of their issues related to friend groups and school pressures and all these things, It was only when we got out of the house into nature and into movement that the most beautiful conversations flowed. So, yes, we were getting a workout. We were going on a hike. We went up to Chautauqua or Shanahan Ridge or one of these beautiful places in our community. And yes, we were moving our bodies and our heart rate was going up and all of that. But even more impactful was, unlike a conversation about, hey, how's life? How's your friends? How's school going for you on the couch, which was never a deep dive. It was never an opportunity for true attunement, at least not in our house. Maybe different for other people. Like we could never get there. There was just the environment and the ambiance of that setting did not afford those kinds of conversations. But man, on a weekend, a long walk, in the morning through the trees, their mouths would open and they literally wouldn't close and they would just dump all of this beautiful content about what really, really matters to them, what's really going on in their lives, the things that I really wanted to know about and participate in and be a part of and be able to soundboard for them in the best way I knew how. But it required that combination of movement and nature and getting outside.
That's beautiful. I mean, today we're focused on the body and we're focused on exercise, but for me, exercise is the fulcrum to so many of the other pillars that, we're going to get to through this series, like connecting it with nature. Being able to do any form of movement outside just amplifies its benefits. The people that I exercise with are my strongest, most heartfelt community, whether that's family. Like I love the fact that my family shares water sports, and now it's 3 generations sharing water sports. That's a really powerful bond. But my old triathlon people, when I see them on the streets, like there's just like a heart connection.
Yeah, totally.
And it's also a way to get into exercise when it feels intimidating. Like get a workout buddy, find a club, just even like find a gym with the right vibe that you're excited to go. But it's fascinating to me how, we can talk about these things in isolation, but in the end, anything that's lifting us up is probably somehow connected to these other pillars in different ways. And it's just a beautiful way, once again, to kind of create magic in your life and create vibrancy and create health.
Yeah. The whole point of this conversation is that we're already always whole. And we have these 4 quadrants and they're sort of these neat categories. But when we talk about wholeness, it's like, well, it's all together. It's all integrated together. They're not, discerned or discrete. They're fully contained within the flow of our day, whether we're aware of it or not. And oftentimes we're not. And the more we can come into connection with those things, I think, again, that's the whole point. That's the path to thriving and flourishing. What didn't we cover that you think is important?
I guess the only thing I want to just mention is on the recovery piece, because ironically, in a sense, we're talking about movement, but recovery, and at least in part, is moving less or not moving at all.
Yeah.
And I mentioned sort of some of my modalities around like foam rolling and even stretching can have an element of recovery to it.
Totally.
But there are so many cool new technologies to support the recovery process. Like I utilize red light therapy, like, whether it's massage, just to speak to the fact that recovery can be active, it can be passive, it can be, done in your own way, like sitting and reading a book or hydrating while enjoying the sunshine. But just to shine a light on the fact that, once again, choosing something that is really nourishing for you, like observing your own body's needs, what works for you, and just making sure that it's on your radar as an element to optimal health, even if there's not a direct prescription for how everyone should do it.
Yeah. I mean, if we all had a sauna and a cold plunge and, and a masseuse or whoever, that we could incorporate at least on a regular basis, man, that would move the needle. I love the fact that you roll and incorporate that in your stretching. I think what that really does is activate a lot of the cellular metabolites and allows them to sort of get flushed out and detoxified. We store a lot of lactic acid in these muscles, and oftentimes if you haven't had a massage in a long time, and somebody gives you a deep tissue massage, you actually don't feel very well for a day or two. And the reason is you're releasing a lot of those muscle toxins into the bloodstream. It's so important to flush those out with lots of hydration, lots of salt and minerals and antioxidants. And you can even promote the detoxification with glutathione. I think that can be really helpful. What type of rolling practice do you incorporate?
So I have a pretty hard foam roller, and I tend to start with my spine. And I find after the compression of standing through most of the day, I'm usually getting a few adjustments. I also shattered my vertebrae, so keeping my spine really integrated and open is pretty important. Then I move to my hips. A lot of, especially Westerners, hold a lot of tension from sitting in their hips. So to take some time to really get in there and smooth things out. And I similarly on foam roller will do my hamstrings and calves. And then I just personally find it more effective to use. I use a company called The Stick. It's just a long stick that looks like, almost like a baking stick. And I roll my rolling pin, thank you, and roll my quads. And that to me just seems to get the blood and lymph moving in just the right way. And it's become at this point like a Pavlovian response to then sleeping. I didn't mention this before, but I set up pillows in such a way that I'm almost in like a yoga corpse pose, but with like props as a method to sleep, which is very intentional to sort of benefit, like this pillar we'll talk about another time, sleep. But it also just, for me, allows my whole body to settle. And for like if there's recovery that needs to be done, it just seems to be more complete. I sleep deeper, which aids in recovery. And maybe that's just a nod to the fact that if you aren't sleeping well, you are not recovering properly. And so while we were more discussing kind of a rest day or methods to increase your recovery through things like foam rolling, sleep is I often say there's no real replacement for sleep. And so assuring that you are sleeping properly so that you have the energy to exercise, sleeping properly so that you know that you've recovered properly so that you don't risk injury, is just worth just a moment.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think finding a way to bring that exercise routine to actually optimize your sleep quality as well is really important. The last piece I wanted to cover was this whole idea of injury, both injury prevention as well as once I have an injury, what do I do? And, does that mean that I should stop working out and, all of those things? Where would you like to dive in there?
I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and as I mentioned, a two-sport collegiate athlete. So I grew up in a home where if there was an injury, I had the best support you could possibly imagine. But it came from very much the Western medicine perspective. In my 20s, I took a very big snowboarding fall. I shattered C6 and C7, which is right at your neck. And that was the moment where I actually turned more in the direction of kind of Eastern medicine as a method for healing. I'm extremely grateful for yoga because if I had listened to the doctors and the physical therapists I worked with, they didn't think I would ever do a handstand or a headstand and that I'd even have issues with things like running or high impact sports. I went on to compete in triathlons again. Like I can hold a handstand for minutes. I can do a headstand. I even can get back on roller coasters and things that were quite unheard of. But that's because I took very seriously my recovery. So when I have a client that experiences an acute injury, I immediately encourage them to not stop movement, but stop anything that's going to actually trigger that injury.
Yeah.
I think I want them to take it seriously. I want them to figure out what's really going on. And sometimes that means stopping for a minute. There's so many ways to move your body that there's very few injuries that mean you have to stop exercising, but it may mean you stop exercising one particular way.
Indeed.
Which is where sort of being a hybrid athlete or having a diverse portfolio of movement practices can be phenomenally useful, because you don't miss a beat. You just shift a little bit. I am a big fan of really high quality physical therapists, but I also have utilized things like acupuncture, different like electric stimuli type forms of acupuncture and massage. Some people love chiropractors. My body prefers a massage. But learning what you need to heal an injury and allowing the healing of that injury to, once again, like have a goal and have incremental steps in that direction and have that be woven into your training protocol is vitally important, or else you're going to carry these injuries and just start collecting them. Now, I have some injuries, like the neck injury, that I don't consider are ever fully resolved. So I don't sleep on an airplane because that would just cripple me for days. If I'm very careful to keep magnesium in my system, because if I deal with muscle spasming, it can throw me off pretty egregiously. But barring those really severe injuries, I try to like truly clear my injuries. But that requires focus and effort. And if it doesn't do it in sort of a normal trajectory of like healing that you would expect from rest, through utilizing things like maybe massage and ice that you can do at home, then I'm seeking support.
Yeah.
And that costs money. And again, there's privilege in that. But again, health is my number one priority and a non-negotiable. And what I see is that when somebody collects all these injuries over time, they start limiting that portfolio of movement that they can do. And not only does that mean that they have like restrictions on being able to move in that 30 minutes that they have for work, and like, oh, I have to skip my workout because I can't do that one thing that feels safe. But when you hold a lot of injuries, you don't move as fluidly and you're more apt to injure yourself generally. Like, watch an animal move and it's very fluid. If somebody's protecting something, then they're not going to be able to kind of fall gracefully. They're going to actually hurt themselves worse. So if it's a call to action at all, it's a call to really, really take an injury seriously, continue moving, but continue moving in a safe way, and seek help if you find it not healing on its own.
Love that. So good. I think the essence or the thrust of all of this is why we're saying there's not one best way to move or exercise. It's not the 1980s version of fitness, which the marathon runners with coat hanger shoulders that have no muscles whatsoever, or people that just strength train and completely neglect flexibility and just get more and more contracted. It's really this full-bodied, comprehensive approach to movement that includes cardio, strength, stretching, and stability. Just wanted to come back to, a core value at Cloud Medical, which is this whole idea of find your Achilles and fix it. What does that mean? It means don't ignore it. If you have these niggles, like, let's get to the bottom of it and get to the root of it. Oftentimes, by having a good comprehensive workout routine, you can actually work through many of those things with some rest, with some strengthening, with some stretching. One thing that I find a lot, quite frankly, in the conventional physical therapy space is a hyper-focus on the injured body part. And I think that that's a mistake. I think you have to look well above and well below the injury to really understand the impact that it has on the big kinetic chain, because ultimately that neck bone that you injured is connected to your toe bone, right? And in one big fluid thing. So the body workers that we tend to work with at Cloud are the ones that see that full body in its context and don't just hyper-focus or hyper-isolate the knee problem or the elbow problem. If you have an elbow problem, I guarantee there's something going on with the shoulder and probably with the wrists and the hand that needs some attention as well. So those are kind of foundational things.
Such genius in that. I mean, in the end, I think that's why I turned to yoga after my neck broke, was because it's an integrative practice, and it teaches you to listen to the patterns and the spirals of movement throughout the body. And I went most of my teenage years not able to heal a knee injury because everybody I went to for support would just focus on the knee. And it wasn't really until I got into my body through yoga and started moving in these more 3D patterns and in these unique shapes that I started seeing the correlation between hips and knee, foot and knee, shoulder and knee. And to this day, like as I in this last decade of really putting on a lot of muscle mass and turning more towards heavy lifting, I've resolved my knee from 25 years ago more than anything that ever just focused on my knee.
Yeah.
And that is an important one. And once again, it's easier when you have awareness of your body. So start getting in your body and learn that awareness. It's like anything else. It's learnable.
You know, one foundational series that I am a real fan of that we'll link in the show notes is the YouTubers who have a background in physical therapy, but have gone far beyond kind of the orthodoxy and the convention, going by the names of knees over toes. Do you know those guys?
Oh my God, I love him.
Unbelievable. So they have like a foundational series of releasing joints that are oftentimes neglected, starting with the MTP, the big toe joint, the knee, obviously, the hip, the shoulders. And so they do, I think it's a 15-minute series. You don't have to do it every day. It's the whole point, right? Once a week is enough. Maybe twice a week, if you have a lot of problems, is probably plenty. And this mind in the body, the mind in the muscle, the mind in the joints, intentional releasing, intuiting what's wrong with this body part. Why is it hurting? The depth of insight and curiosity and wonder as opposed to neglect.
Well, he leans in to the injured joint in a way that I think, at least in the past, Western medicine tended to avoid. Like the recommendation was always, well, if that hurts, don't do it. And sure, if it hurts a lot and you're doing it wrong, that's going to keep injuring it. But what it forgets is, well, I still need to be able to bend my knee. I still need to walk up and down stairs. That hurts. Well, we need to teach you how to do it in a way where it's kind of the hurt so good. And
hurt so good. Good pain versus bad pain,
Yeah, and really leaning into overcoming the imbalances that led to the injury in the first place.
Yeah. So to kind of bring it all back, we're talking about the exercise pillar, the movement of the body, these 4 primary categories that are so fundamental to incorporate into your routine, and as little or as much as you want, but don't eliminate any of these. Cardio, strength, flexibility and stability, and then obviously some rest. Get help if you have pain. Don't let that Achilles heel continue to niggle you. Try to find a way to fix it. Why? So that you don't end up at 60, 70, and 80 in chronic pain like so many people do. And, I think just to kind of start to wrap this up, I'd like to add a couple of new innovations that can really help our journey along the way, particularly if we do get injured. And those are some of the more novel peptide therapies, which are really pretty exciting. So the one that we use quite a lot is BPC 157. It is a healing peptide. It's a tissue regenerator. It works best when you inject it near, not necessarily into the injured body part. And, all tissue repair fundamentally requires the building block of tissue. What is that? That's collagen. Collagen doesn't do much on its own. If all you do is ingest collagen, you're basically putting a whole bunch of bricks in your front yard. But those bricks need cement to actually, create the integrity if you want to build a wall. And that cement comes from vitamin C. So vitamin C is the cross-linking vitamin for collagen. So if you have an injury, if you're recovering from surgery, a really great supplement regimen would be vitamin C plus collagen. And then if you're interested in going a little further, BPC 157 is a very potent healing peptide for tissue repair.
So exciting. I feel like there's some really revolutionary options coming out that are allowing people to really aim for the 100+
Yeah,
functional human, right?
totally.
Yeah. And I'm so excited for the practice that you're offering to Boulder and hopefully beyond.
Yeah. Well, once again, great to chat with you. I think we covered a lot of ground today on the exercise
So
pillar.
much fun.
Yeah. Always so many more things we can unpack, but the next one will be on sleep. So we'll go really deep on rest and recovery and rejuvenation.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie.